Seema Alexander is the founder of Disruptive CEO, where she partners with growth-focused expert entrepreneurs and CEOs to guide them and their teams through her U.N.I.Q.U.E Method, transforming their businesses to become scalable and sought after, preparing them for their breakout year or years in growth. Seema is also a co-organizer and co-producer of DC Startup Week, which is how we met, where they support over 11,000 local entrepreneurs from idea to growth, and a strategic advisor for select growth-focused startups, an entrepreneur in residence at USG, and board member for a nonprofit, Codespa. Did I say that right? Codespa? Codespa America. Seema, welcome to Hustle and Grace.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Hillary, for having me.
Oh my gosh, I feel bad for the Codespa people, but now everyone will know that's exactly how you say it. Okay. I'm so glad to have you with me today. We already kind of got into it before I hit record. There's so much to talk about. So let's just start with just you telling your story. You know, you're first generation American from what I understand, right? Child of immigrants?
Yes, child of immigrants.
So how did you get from child of immigrants to your career and life today? Can you just kind of give us the 10,000 foot view?
Yeah. My story starts always with my parents in the 70s, right? They are truly the immigrant story, came from India, with nothing. So they always tell me, literally with no shoes, like one of those extreme, they ended up through a lot of sweat equity. I mean, crazy stories that they would tell me about working in factories and working at whatever, all these things. But my mom was this incredible chef. Okay. And she enjoyed cooking. And what they realized that there was a gap in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area where there was not any Indian restaurants in the area. And so
it's hard to imagine now, but back then, exactly, I believe it.
Crazy. So they were actually pioneers, right? So they solved the gap. They created the first Indian vegetarian restaurant, catty corner to the White House off of K Street. In the 70s, and it ran for about 20 years, so a little over 20 years. And so that's where my roots are, hospitality. My dad was a little bit of a hustler. There was a travel agency and later a grocery store, and he just had his pockets in a lot of community-based also organizations and otherwise. So I grew up around 12 years old, working and managing and doing large-scale caterings, all that stuff. And all of that sounds good, except when you're 12 and you just want to hang out with your friends. But I learned a lot. Learned a lot. But so this is when everything sort of went from going really well, being pioneers, to several years later being close to bankruptcy. And so that's where the story shifts for me, Hillary. It's like they went from this level of confidence and level of, I don't like the word prestige because that's not what it is. They were very humble people. They brought communities together, Americans, Indians, politicians, celebrities in this the restaurant wasn't this posh place. It was like this beautiful hole in the wall that had really great comfort food, right? The Washington Post actually was like, can't you believe it's this cheap? It was one of those, but it brought a lot of folks together. But what happened is they didn't pay attention to competition. They had or communications skills within the company itself. They had made bad investment choices, all of these things as they were looking to scale. And so I watched my parents go from sort of this confident, whatever, family and just everything to, they actually ended up closing down the restaurants. They got divorced. And I watched my dad become much more sort of depressive, to be very honest, right? Yeah. And it was that moment where I'm like, man, when businesses do well, there's a whole different level of confidence and swag, and you feel good about the momentum and what you're bringing to the community and making money doing it. And then when you don't, right, this is when all of the sort of the health issues, the relationship issues, the anxiety, you know how it is with ups and downs in entrepreneurship in general. But then I started looking into the numbers. I'm like, man, 8 out of 10 businesses fail the first 18 months, which now I'm okay with, because I truly believe not everybody's meant to be an entrepreneur, and that's okay, right? You want to test the waters and see, but the companies that are in it for 5 years or 10 years, then you start to see the numbers go 50% fail at that point, this and this, right? And then you're like, wow, how many people from an outside, they look like they're doing amazing because they're entrepreneurs, right? But inside, it's really hard, right? And so I started studying all of these, like what makes businesses fail, what makes them succeed. I remember vividly, I was at University of Maryland for undergrad, and I started leaning in as soon as I got into my marketing classes and strategy. And I was like, this is cool. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I became like a nerd, like, or I love nerds. Nerds are amazing. I love experts, but it was just, I just became sort of like, wow, these are some of the answers that I've been sort of seeking. And then, yeah. And then like, I decided to leave everything entrepreneurship after college. I was like, I want stability. I want New York City. In my head, I wanted to be a chief marketing officer of a Fortune 500 company.
Okay.
And so I started down my path to New York, ended up an anomaly in my generation, stayed about 13 years in one company first at Prudential Financial. And what was really cool, Hillary, was even while I was there, my mind is like a consultant. Like I've always been focused on solving problems differently, creatively, outside the box. And I got to work as one of my first roles is like, how do you take 2,500 financial planners who look like everybody else, right? And help them become unique in the marketplace, help them scale their businesses, right? And and so like, that was like, wow, okay, there is this world that people and businesses can look like commodities. How do you make them unique and different? Then I had a really awesome opportunity to work with all the chief marketing officers at Prudential when we were going through our historical rebrand of a 136-year-old company at that time. It's older now. And that process, it blew my mind because it was like, it doesn't matter. There's always inflection points in companies, right? But at that point, I was like, wow, it matters of how you position your company in the marketplace to be known for what you're good at so you can attract the right people. And there's a whole strategy that goes behind that. It's not a, like, okay, this is it and this is what we're going to do. Like there's a framework to help you really understand what that means for your company. Because as you probably know, as an entrepreneur in the beginning, you're kind of like trying to be everything to everybody, whatever brings revenue in the door, right?
Totally. Like if you want to buy something, I will sell it to you.
Let's do it. Like, I can do it. I can figure it out, or I can Google it, or my team can figure it out, right? That starts to actually take away from like how you stand out in the marketplace, because people start to see you, even with years of experience, as just a commodity. Prudential is just another company. There's MetLife, there's all these other companies, but man, if you actually dug deep into what they've done, what they're doing in their business, not, what they've been working on, they're so different, right? And they hadn't had those that time to really sit and take it, to articulate it in the marketplace and start to focus on who they should be really attracting. So long story short, I ended up, I was like at that point, the breadwinner in the family, things were going well, right under the chief marketing officer, and life happened. At 36, I was between both of my children. So now, I don't know, this like 9 years ago, I had my first of 2 pulmonary embolisms. And again, I always say people don't know what that is. So I always kind of give a description, but it is a blood clot that went from my calf to my lungs. And I don't always share the story in detail, but honestly, it was the most pain, the scariest thing. Like I couldn't even get inside the MRI machine. Like it was like, all of a sudden I couldn't physically, I was like putting my head to the pillow. I was at a conference in DC and I could not physically breathe. It was like,
gosh,
I'm 36. I was by myself. I was traveling for work and I was like, this is just not okay. Like something is really wrong.
And you take that so for granted when you're a young, healthy person. Like if your body starts to fail you, what do you do?
What do you do? What do you do? You take yourself to the hospital. That's what you do. Right. And by the time I got to the hospital, I was in so much physical pain. I felt like back labor. If people who have had children, I know a lot of moms listen to this, right? I got into the I mean, finally they somehow got me into the MRI machine, but eventually they were like, you had a pulmonary embolism. And I was like, what is that? It's like one my grandma had. Like, I don't like,
Right.
your point, right?
Sure.
So I didn't even process it. They gave me blood thinners. I was there for 3 days. I had a panic attack the next day, whatever. It was just kind of crazy. But all I kept thinking about was, I got to get back to work. Got to get back to work. 3 days later, I was back in my office. Within 15 minutes, I had every symptom come back.
Whoa.
Every symptom. I ended up in the hospital for a week this time. And they told me I could have been a widowmaker, not once, but twice, because the blood thinners were not working and my clot was still pretty large and, there. And that's when everything shifted, Hillary. That's when I was like, wow, like I've always been purposeful and tried to be with intention, but it made me like realize like my life, I shouldn't be here. Like, I could have not been here.
Yeah.
How do I then? And it was like a year of like, I want to be out now from corporate. I want to do my own thing. I got my entrepreneurial itch back. I was already side hustling for a long time with consulting clients and just helping experts build their brands. It's just something I enjoy doing. Like,
Right. It's like fun.
It's passion and fun, but I'm good at it and I can help these people. Right. And then I decided to leave a year later, and then comes the whole entrepreneur journey, which I can go into now. If you want to ask questions around, I'm happy to do whatever you want me to share.
Yeah. So is that what brought you back to the DC area? Like when you made that sort of like a life shift transition, you went back to entrepreneurship, you moved to the DC metro area, you had 2 children. Does that sort of all happen around the same time?
No, actually, we moved to Brooklyn, New York. Initially, I was partnered. I was in 2 health and wellness startups, and one of the founders was in Brooklyn, which was amazing. Like, I loved Williamsburg. We didn't want to leave. I was working in these startups, and then I started Disruptive like 2 years later. And it was just that I've worked with now thousands of founders, a lot of female founders, helping them really get clear on their strategy and their growth. And we can talk about all that in a second. But what moved us back was about now 5 years ago. So this is what 2022 was family. All right. Yeah. And again, for your audience, this is good to hear, right? Like my husband and I have been together a very long time. His dad actually turns 90 on Thursday, like this week, right? So he had a triple bypass surgery. He kept falling. His mom couldn't take care of him. So life happened, right?
Yeah.
And we didn't want to move. We even considered bringing them to New York, but it would just financially and the space and it just didn't make sense.
Yeah.
So we moved back, and we both are from here. We knew eventually we'd move back, but there's a little bit of an identity crisis in that too. We could talk about it, but as a mom and at that point 2 young kids, there's a lot of family and good stuff in this area, but then you're moving from like Brooklyn, fun, walkable, to suburbia, still like beautiful. I'm like thankful, but just a different lifestyle. In-laws moving in, there was a whole shift of
that's relatable content, Seema, because my husband is a New Yorker. He grew up in the Bronx, and we now live in the DC suburbs. Yeah. And when walkability is like your norm, and also too, we moved to the DC area about 5 years ago, and I feel like it during normal circumstances, in my opinion, it takes about 5 years to really feel like you belong somewhere, like you have community, that it's your spot. But when 2 of those 5 years are like a pandemic, it feels like you've been here even like less time in terms of like really getting in and being intentional and building those roots. Yes. But I'm so glad you are here.
Yes.
And that Disruptive CEO is here. I would love to hear you talk a little bit about your proprietary U.N.I.Q.U.E method. Like, could you unpack that acronym, what it means, and what it is that you do for entrepreneurs and leaders?
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to that previous story, I ended up working with individual groups. I did group, so it was all strategy and growth for years. And then come COVID, because COVID had 2 options. You were just kind of, everyone had their moments of crazy. And then it was like, wow, I can actually pause and really think about my 20 years of experience and what I want to bring to this world, right? From the stuff I've learned, from the things that I've seen. I remember I went through this Red Elephant program in New York. They're a group that does a lot of stuff on public speaking and how do you package and position your offers and all that stuff on stage. And I remember going up and being like, okay, I started spewing these 8 out of 10 businesses, five, at 5 years, 50% fail. And they're like, Seema, these are like cliche statistics, like come up with something bigger and better. That's yours, right? And I just kept thinking about that. I was like, you know what? Actually, that's what I believe, right? Like there is these inflection points in business. And so every time I work with a founder, it's like, who you are when you first start is never where you end up. And so the things that I would get very clear with these individuals, which really starts to catalyze their brands and their businesses, right? 6 months from later, a year from later, and I'll explain how this process works. But getting you clear on who you are now, who you do it best for, who you no longer do it best for, who you no longer do it for. And I'll get into what that means in a second, how you do it uniquely and differently. And then you go to the market and you think about your messaging and your thought leadership and the strategic partnerships. And it was like that hasn't been coined, right? Everyone talks about working on your business, not in your business, but no one has coined what that means, right? And so I would see like there were like these common themes. People are focused on too many things, which cause like unscalability in your company, right? And this could be literally could be a one-person shop. I did this with Codespa. You brought them up, right? 36-year-old nonprofit. I focused on alleviating poverty around the world. Their honorary president is the King of Spain. It works, right? And so those conversations just kept happening. It was like too many focuses, not a clear niche, right? They don't really know their ideal client. They make a lot of assumptions, but when they go out to market, so their offers are unaligned. Their brand is all over the place because they haven't done this work. And so repositioning, quote unquote, has always been my expertise for brands for years, but that word doesn't land with entrepreneurs, right? Unless you're like truly going from lifestyle to growth. And, that's when we can talk about that. But so I was like, what can I do? What is it that I've seen that are the core strategic decision points that I can create tools, strategies, tips to get an entrepreneur to say, wow, okay, I'm at this point now that I can make these decisions. By the end of it, I move from looking like a commodity to almost a Sherpa, right? You've had the years of experience. So everyone I work with a minimum has to have at least 3 years of experience because you need data. You need to have the pain points. You need to have the wins. You need to have some traction, right? And then I kept seeing like, okay, there's all this like business model canvas, early sort of stuff out there. And when people are thinking about scaling, they're talking about people, process, technology, obviously all super important. But the problem is like, if they're not clear and aligned today on who they are as a business and your model is not aligned to your brand messaging, all of this, like hiring all these people, they're going to get very frustrated when they're trying to sell for you because you're not clear yourself, right? So U.N.I.Q.U.E, what I call it, so it's U.N.I. and then Q.U.E, right? And literally it's an acronym. So U stands for unicorn vision. So I'll actually step back. The first 3 things in U.N.I.Q.U.E are what I call your unique indicators. It's what makes your company different. It's the core elements. If you get it right, then the amplifying it, what I call your unique amplifiers, comes much easier. And a lot of these like crazy decisions for entrepreneurs, like, okay, what content do I put out? Like, do I go networking to this thing? How do I even like get my brand out? I have brand shame. Like, it doesn't even represent who we are today. Like, there are all these normal things that hinder you from amplifying your message, even when you're an expert. And that's when I was like, there's so many people who can change the world or change a community, change a business, but it's hard for them to articulate those core things. So then they look like everybody else, right? And so U stands in U.N.I.Q.U.E, your unicorn vision. So this means, especially the service-based industry, you hear the word unicorn a lot in like startup tech space, right? And that's cool, of course, but the first time I was like, what does unicorn actually mean, right? And it's just like this, like it's higher than like your normal attainability. It's that next phase up, right? And I always say, by this point in your business, let's get a vision so clear that it's not only inspiring you, and if you have a team, inspiring your team, right? But it's also strategic. So you're actually making decisions, saying yes to things that make sense for the vision to drive forward, and no to things. And the no is so important because, with opportunity, with traction comes opportunity, right? So unicorn vision is a huge one. The N stands for niche positioning. And I actually call it your learned niche positioning, because in the beginning, when people hear the word niching, they're like, oh shit, like I have the fear of missing out. Like I want to serve everybody. I can serve everybody. It's not me. I can hire somebody, and the reality is the most successful businesses own where they play at their strengths. But I never start with, okay, who's your ideal client? Da, da, da. I say, okay, who are the people that you've been working with that have been distracting you from scalability? Who can say they appreciate your expertise, but truly they're looking at you like a commodity. Like they're looking at you as just another service provider, versus when you're working with somebody who's an ideal client, they're seeing you as an expert that can help them transform from where they are to where you want to go. I want to own and help you articulate what that transformation looks like for these individuals. But you understand who's your unideal client? Who's your ideal client? What does the market actually desire? Right. So that's what the niche positioning really ends up doing for people. It's really helping them figure out where they play at their strengths and how to lead in the marketplace. Right. The third part of unique is your intellectual property, right? I call it like your intelligence packaged, Hillary. Think about that, right? So it's like, okay, our business or me as an individual, I've been doing this for years. Like now I'm clear on where we're headed, who I serve best, who I no longer serve. What do my people really want from me? What's the transformation that they're truly seeking? And instead of talking about like, okay, I can create a website and I can do this, it's like they're looking for something that's massively it's like, I want a website that not only articulates my brand, but it converts and it has like leads that are associated, that attracts my ideal client. Like talk to me in a way that you're going to get me from X to Z because you've done it before. You've earned it. Right? You've had consistency with your clients. One of the most beautiful things I do, I think, when with my clients, and I do it either in large scale engagements, I run an accelerator program, which is really fun and game changing for people with you leveraging unique. But I'm like, okay, go back and look at your last 20 clients. Just, and I have a very specific charting for what I asked for them to do. And all of a sudden they start to see the trends and they're like, oh my God, like, yes, these are the people that I would love working with. And actually they appreciated the work that I did. And guess what? They paid us the most, right? Because that's always the thing. People want to be heard. People want to be seen. People want to be paid their worth, right? And you have to be able to bring that together in the way you're articulating who you are, what you do, so that you're attracting those people. So that's what U.N.I, unicorn vision, niche positioning, really owning your niche. I is now your own proprietary IP that makes you different than any of your competition, if you will. I don't believe in competition because everyone has their unique experiences. When you're clear with that, then the last part of unique is how do you amplify it to the marketplace? Now you're talking about qualified thought leadership because you know how you want to be seen. So let's create a content strategy, the way that you're out speaking, thought leadership, like let's hone in on that so you become known for that, right? And then like all your funnels, whatever all that looks like starts to make much more sense because you're clear on the core elements of your business now. Then it's unifying your brand messaging. Like, let's bring your brand together now, right? It's like one of my biggest, when cringe moments is like when an entrepreneur is like, I just going to hire that marketing agency. They'll fix it for me. Right. And like, the problem is if you don't do this work and you're going to keep getting disappointed because your business model is broken, they can't solve for that. Many don't have the expertise to even probe you to get there. But if you go through a process like this, then once you have a creative brief with a marketing agency, it's so clear for them. Because now you're aligned, you know how this all kind of fits in well for your business. And then the last part of U.N.I.Q.U.E is what I call your organic marketing strategy, is enrolling your niche network. So Hillary, you've been in business how long?
I've been at least a freelancer for about 15 years.
Okay, so strategic partnerships and relationships are really key to growing and scaling outside of the advertising strategies, all the other, of course, all the multi-channel stuff. But when I say now, it's like when you're clear on who you are, what you do, your niche, you can be very selective of a group of 5 or 6 companies, people who become a mutual, like there's mutual benefit in being a strategic partner. So either you guys share the same audience, but you're doing different things. Either there's a JV opportunity, affiliate, whatever it may look like, but partnerships can be such a big opportunity instead of trying to nurture everybody, right? Like, it's like, wow, like, and I can tell you so many stories around all this stuff, but that's what U.N.I.Q.U.E stands for. So once you're clear on all those core pieces, and again, I do it in a 10-week business growth accelerator with, as a group, but, and then as larger consultancies have, it's just a total different structure, but the same concept. It's just much more hands-on to those things. So it really depends, but I'm trying to now focus on the digital side of things to get this tool out there, because I 100% believe this is the missing link for so many entrepreneurs. And if they get this type of clarity, they can amplify what they're really good at, who they want to be in front of and serve. It will be game changing.
That's amazing. I love that. I took so many notes just now. In addition to your work with Disruptive CEO, you're also a co-organizer of DC Startup Week, which is huge in the area and really is making waves like around the country. So my question to you is, can you just share a little bit about, your experience with DC Startup over the years and like how people could get involved with that?
Oh, yeah. So when I moved to DC, like 5 years ago, I mentioned that I had a little bit of an identity crisis. And part of that was like moving from, a place that you could walk and do anything and very cultural to like being in the suburban area, surrounded by family and friends, all good. But my entrepreneurial identity was missing, right? And so about a year later, I was asked to be a speaker at DC Startup Week and business growth strategy. It was great. And when I got there, I was like, wow, here's that energy I've been seeking. Like, where has this been hiding? And I had attended other events and stuff, but it wasn't the same sort of level of energy. And then I met one of the co-organizers, Corey Lawrence, then who's our head of marketing. And started talking to him. He introduced me to Rachel. And then the previous former founding partner was kind of leaving from being sort of as involved. And I was like, guys, I see this being something you guys are already doing incredible. We take it to the next level. I'm a strategy growth person. Wow. Like, I want to be involved. And that's sort of how it first started. What was crazy is the pandemic happened. Right. So for the last couple of years, we've been initially all virtual because we had to, right? So we had like 5,000 people on virtual Zooms. You were part of it, I remember, right? Like, it was a different sort of coordination, right? But still great. But life in pandemic was life in pandemic. And then this year was the 3rd year that I'm involved, was like the first time it was back in real life. We had 187 sessions, 8 different venues across the city, 5 days, 6,000 entrepreneurs rolled through, major keynote speakers, great workshops. I mean, it was just, the energy was sick.
And all free. Like, let me point that out, which is crazy because the value that you get, I mean, it's comparable to other major conferences that have crazy ticket prices. So it's really incredible. I would even suggest to people listening, like, if you're an entrepreneur, even if you're not from the area, like, put it on your calendar, come to DC for this. Like, it is that amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always in September. We're going to announce our next dates for 2023 soon. We also do year-long programming, and you're right. This is founder driven for the founder community. We get money through sponsorships. We're really looking to expand through grants and other things this year because we know the impact we're making economically, the relationships that are being built, the growth in the companies that are happening. And, entrepreneurship is lonely.
Right.
You can be super lonely. Like, you're working on something. A lot of times it's you in the beginning, right? And it's like, wow, like it's a lot, right? And so part of us is focused on, a major part is community building, right? Because you shouldn't do it alone. You don't need to, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So wherever you are, find that creative community, find that entrepreneur community. It might be, in DC with a conference like this, or another mastermind or wherever it is that you are. Seema, thank you so much for joining us today. Could you share where people can find you online and connect with you?
Yeah, disruptive.ceo is my website. If you go to disruptive.ceo/unique method, you can also take a look at the actual methodology at a very high level. Would love to connect with you and learn more. So I know there are incredible moms listening in who are focused on their dream and their vision. So excited to, again, Hilary, be on with you and support them in any which way I can.
Thank you so much, Seema.
Thank you.